Good morning, my name is Pam Travis. Today we're going to make my grandmother Riggenbach's homemade egg noodles. They're the very simplest thing in the world to make. I learned to cook when I was in high school. My mother worked afternoons, and so it was my job to cook dinner for myself, my three brothers, and my stepfather. My mother would have dinner preparations made. The dinner preparations would be in the refrigerator. The instructions would be on a piece of paper, and I would come home and start dinner. This is how I learned to love to cook. However, after we had dinner, I would get up from the table and my brothers would have to clean up. They would have to load the dishwasher, clean the stove, and clean up the mess that I made while I was cooking. So consequently, I love to learn to cook. I still love to cook today, but I have to do the cleanup myself. We're going to start with these noodles with a cup of all-purpose unbleached flour and a teaspoon of salt. To this mixture, we're going to add egg yolks. We're going to start with 4 egg yolks. I normally do not use a recipe. I just make these noodles as I go. You get a feel for how the noodles should be made. They have a certain texture. So we're going to combine these 4 egg yolks into this cup of flour. And I need to stress, only egg yolks. And you can see as we mix this, and I would encourage you to only buy organic eggs. We have a farmer here locally in Carrollton that I get my eggs from every week, and they are free-range organic eggs. So this is how the dough looks. It's dry, and we just need it to come together so that we can roll it out. So to do that, I'm just going to add a little bit of water, just a touch. This will bring our dough together so that we can roll it out. Now normally when I make eggs or make noodles, I make 2 or 3 cups of flour. So you would have to accordingly increase the ingredients. But this is going to actually make a lot of noodles. Okay, I use a pastry cloth. You can do this on a wooden board. I'm going to flour my pastry cloth. Dump out my dough. And form it into a ball. If it's sticky, just add flour to it. The most important thing about making noodles is that you don't work your dough too much. You don't handle it too much. If you do handle your dough too much, then your your noodles can be very tough. This dough is just about right. Now at this point during the process, I would take this bowl, put it over the noodles, and I would let it rest for 30 minutes. But because of time today, I'm not going to allow the dough to rest. This just lets the gluten in the flour relax down a little bit so your noodles aren't tough. And we're going to roll the noodles out. I also use a sleeve on my rolling pin when I roll out dough like this, or even pie dough. It just doesn't allow the dough to stick. And we just keep adding flour. You don't want to add too much flour, just enough to keep it from sticking. Now you can roll this dough out as thick or as thin as you like. We kind of like thick noodles here, kind of big and thick. My grandmother used to make all kinds of noodles. She would make thick, wide noodles. She would make, somehow, I don't know how she did it, but she could make almost angel hair noodles by cutting them very, very thin. And when she rolled out her dough like this, she would roll it up and then cut the noodles from the roll. I have never been able to master that. I always end up with my noodles sticking together. So what I use is pizza cutter. She would also make noodles in squares about like this. And she called them Popeyes. And I think this might have come from the Pennsylvania Dutch. But my grandfather was actually from Switzerland, and these noodles were a product of his Swiss heritage. I think she must have learned to make these noodles from her mother-in-law. That feels pretty good. Now I'm just going to grab my pizza cutter. And we're never been very particular about how our noodles look. It's all about the way they taste. Now this same dough you can use to make dumplings. Instead of a dry dough though, you add extra egg yolks and make it a little bit wet. And then you can just drop your dumplings by a teaspoonful into either boiling chicken broth or beef broth or ham broth. Now I had an uncle, my dad's brother, who loved his dumplings in hot tomato juice, which I've never tried, but he loved them. So you just continue cutting out your noodles, and then you just kind of put them over here because you want them to dry out a little bit. Now some people will cook these in boiling salted water before they put them in their broth. I've never done that because I like my chicken broth a little bit thick, and the extra flour helps to thicken the broth. And these are what they look like. You can cut them in half if you don't want long noodles. I just dump them in the boiling water and away they come. So this is how you make homemade noodles. Very easy.